Welcome back into Table Talk. I'm Brian Kell, along with Sheriff of Coffee County, Chad Partin, and I guess we talked a lot about you, talked a lot about the campaign, and then also talked a little bit about those first days of just some of the changes, but thought we'd expound a little bit more about, especially looking back now over the past 14, 15 months, Sheriff, just talk about the changes that you've been able to help bring about. I'm sure with the help of many others with your team and department and everything.
We have. I've got a really dedicated, hard-working team, and of course, with any change of office, especially like mine, the previous sheriff had been there 20 years, unopposed. So there was a lot.
Never had anybody run against. Okay.
Nobody.
Unopposed.
Nobody even thought about it.
Right.
I didn't even think about it. but like I said, things change, and I knew this was going to be tough because I was part of it. I didn't. We got settled in, and it was kind of set in there like concrete, and things was pretty tough, and it was just the way we did business, and I really had to step out and bust that bubble and say, look, we've got to make some changes. We had just completed a $20 million new jail, which is a story in itself, but it is what it is. Mm-hmm. We got it where we got it. I feel like we went back 40 years from a justice center back to hauling inmates, 3.1 miles every day, 20 and 30 at a time. But we're going to
annex I was talking about right there.
Because
right?
we've moved from the old jail, which had in 1982 opened up with the courtrooms attached to it, and we were the innovators of that in the state. I mean, that was a big deal back in the early 80s. But anyway, we're dealing with that. We're hoping to have some projects coming in the near future to help change that. We've got to be financially savvy and be a good steward of the tax dollars. But I've also got to look at the long period of what's the cost way on down the road. Yeah, I may get scrutinized here in the beginning, but down the road it's going to eventually save some money. But with that, breaking that stalemate of, hey, let's look at new ways of doing things, and if it doesn't work, we're going to change it again. If that doesn't work, we're going to change it again. We're still doing that. Mm-hmm. And I will continue to do that until I get the right combination of either people or projects or procedures that are successful.
Right.
And you just got to try and try again. So my first year has been really dedicated to the jail. Any sheriff out here that's a county of my size, or even Tommy's here in Warren County, that says that jail doesn't take up 80% of your time, I don't know what they're doing, but it does. The jail is my biggest issue to deal with on a daily basis. But we've had some staffing changes. We've had a change in some of the procedures and the way we do things, and it seems to work. We're finally getting staffed up. I had gotten so low on staff because of turnover that we had a workhouse opened up at the old jail that I came in and I brought all the workhouse inmates and all the employees. There was 12 of the employees. I brought them all back to the main jail. We never missed a beat on working inmates. We didn't shut down the work program. We just changed the venue and got everybody back on one campus. That got our staffing back up, and we've kept building on that since that time, and we're still working very well with that. In the future, we're going to need to look at doing some kind of pre-engineered metal building out there at the jail to house about 50 work inmates in to keep from adding on a $5 or $6 million 200-bed concrete and steel addition pods,
right.
And that's a lot cheaper. Mm-hmm. So we're negotiating about that, but right now our jail population, when I came in, we were full. When I left to come up here today, our jail population was very satisfactory. We're maintaining that. TCI, Tennessee Corrections Institute, is has us certified, and we want to work every day to keep that certification. So, we've worked hard to get our jail population down to a manageable level. That takes working with the judiciary, working with the judges, the DA, and the attorneys, particularly the public defender's office. We're not always going to agree. They're definitely not going to agree with me.
Right.
But it's my responsibility of the sheriff to notify, hey, we've got problems out here, and what can we do to resolve this?
And I also saw in an article I was reading about you about this subject that you know, not only is it working with all those other entities you talked about, but I think you even stated, hey, listen, you know, our team, our department, we are going to go about things in dealing with people, you know, and as far as arrest and how that's done. I know you spend a lot of time, just, you know, dealing with your side of things too, as well.
Yeah, it's a fine balance. You know, it's easy to go out here and pull people off the street, arrest them, and put them in jail and forget about them. Who's the real victim in that? And so, yes, there's the victims, and there's the defendants, and then there's society. And we've got to play the happy medium there. And you know, a lot of people look at me funny when I say, you know, my goal is to keep the bad folks in jail and get the good folks out. And you know, have we got a lot of people locked up because they don't have a driver's license, or are we focusing on that case where some child may be endangered or hurt, or somebody is you know, taking millions of dollars worth of somebody's property, somebody's dealing thousands or millions of dollars worth of narcotics. You know, we've got to look at picking our battles here in society. And if you look, especially in the larger states and the higher areas, you know, we're seeing that, and you're going to see that here in this county as well. As our populations grow, our priorities change. You know, we fight this battle every day about medical marijuana and so forth and so on. You know, right now it's illegal by the federal government.
Yeah.
And you know, we're going to have that battle come up again, and I'm sure there's a purpose for it. But you know, I would like to see us take all of that energy and send it to Washington D.C. and let them back it off, so the FDA can really do some studies on it. Because right now they can't. It's Schedule I drug. State of Tennessee, it's Schedule VI. But it's hard for me as a sheriff, and all the sheriffs that took an oath of office and raised our hand and swore that we would uphold all laws of the land and the Constitution, that, you know, here we are, the state's looking at legalizing something, and a lot of people, a lot of the politicians don't understand the downfall of that kind of thing, of what it's going to do. You know, when you have other states, and I know I'm getting off on another topic, but we need to listen to what some of these other states that's had these experiences and said, hey, you better think about this, because yes, we were for it, but it's costing us a lot of money down the road.
Certain things that they didn't see.
Right. So, and those kinds of things are what fill jails up. And it fills jails up with petty stuff. And that petty stuff is something that we need to find other alternatives for. Do we need to look at electronic monitoring? Do we need to look at unsupervised probation and call them back in 90 days and put them on a docket and get them before a judge and talk about it? Do we need to extend our probation officers and their duties? I mean, there's all kinds of
Another thing
things that we could explore.
Speaking of folks in jail, one of the things that I was also fascinated by was just in another article, maybe in the Manchester Times article I was reading from some time back, just as far as making sure, I think your quote was that our folks treat people the way they would want to be treated.
Exactly.
And that's very important to you, I know.
You know, and you know, society out here doesn't really care. They just want them off the street. They want them in jail. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want to know about it. You know, I have people tell me, I had somebody tell me this earlier, they said, well, Sheriff, evidently you're doing a good job because we ain't heard nothing good, we ain't heard nothing bad. I said, well, that's great.
Yeah.
You know, everybody knows me knows I'm not a real big press person. I like to keep my head down and leave people alone. But with that being said, yes, they're out there. They're our responsibility to take care of, but that could be it could be your child, my child, your niece, your nephew, your brother, or your sister. It's somebody's loved one. And even though they've committed a crime or they've done something really bad, they're still a human being. Now, does that mean we've got to go out there and coddle them and hug them every day and and just tell them everything? You know, no. Do I have TVs in my jail? No. And as long as I'm sheriff, that'll never happen. Do I have radios in my jail? No, I don't. As long as I'm sheriff, that probably won't happen either. Do I have coffee in my jail? No, I don't. Now, they think I'm pretty cruel on that. I find that the way I've got it running right now, they don't want to come back. But with that being said, it also goes to show that we can talk to them in a good manner. We can provide them programs in there that they can focus on. We can bring folks in of spiritual guidance. We can bring folks in to help educate them. We're wanting to work on some kind of reentry program. We just don't have the space to do that. I mean, we built all these jail beds, but we have no classrooms.
Right.
I mean, we've got 2 classrooms that hold about 10 people. I've got a 400-bed jail, so I've got a lot of, it doesn't figure out very well. So we're trying to get creative with that. But there's ways that you can correct folks, but not have to provide all the toys that they want and conveniences. I mean, when you go to jail, you're there because you did wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to give you the conveniences of a bed and breakfast. We feed 2 hots and 1 cold, and we try to feed them well. We weigh our inmates, and we have to keep up with that. And if anybody's lost weight in our jails, because something ain't right.
Yeah.
And but I've had folks come up and say, well, I've heard this, that, and I'll just say, well, come right on. And we go back through the door and we walk through the jail, and I said, look, talk to anybody you want. It wasn't long after I was there, the press come up. I think one of the girls from the Manchester Times came up and said, well, we've heard about this or this and this. And I said, well, go back there and find out for yourself. And she looked at me and said, are you kidding?
Right.
I said, no, let's go.
Got nothing to hide.
Open the door, hey, Manchester Times. And she literally looked at me and she said, I have never had this happen before.
Yeah.
I said, there ain't but one way to find out, and that's from the horse's mouth. And I said, you can ask them anything you want to ask them. And that's the way you got to be.
Yeah.
And, that's just the way I conduct business.
Well, we haven't been able to talk about a whole lot. We've run out of time.
I understand.
But we'd love to have you back here sometime.
Sure.
And we can talk about many other things, maybe how year 2's gone and all that kind of stuff. But thank you so much for coming in on Table Talk and being a part of this, and we'll get you back over here,
Yes,
okay?
sir.
Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year, too. We're recording this the week before Christmas, and so, again, that's why we're talking about Christmas and New Year's. No matter when you catch this show, Merry Christmas from all of us here at BLTV Channel 6, and a Happy New Year as well. And so until we find more talk at this table, I'm Brian Kell for Karen Wilson, Tammy Vinson, and also Kelvin Bond. We want to, again, wish you a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from all of us here at BLTV Channel 6. Thanks for watching.